Welcome to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. The only podcast where it's okay to talk in band. On this podcast, you will be able to hear conversations with some of the greatest names in wind band conducting, composing, and arranging. We'll also visit with great college, high school, middle school, and elementary band directors to get their thoughts on various aspects of being a band director. We'll have regular check-ins with instrument specialists, music dealers, and instrument repair professionals. And if that's not enough, we'll even have regular conversations with Dr. Tim, who will help keep us motivated. That's Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. And now, here's Charlie.
Welcome to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends, and this, episode number 48 in our podcast series. We have a special conversation coming up today with two legends of Missouri bands, Jerry Hoover and Herb Duncan. Jerry taught at Jefferson City High School, went on and became director of bands at New Mexico State University, and ended his career at Missouri State University, where he developed an incredible band program. And Herb Duncan taught at Normandy High School in the St. Louis area for many years, started the Greater St. Louis Marching Band Festival, has been active in the Lambda chapter, which is Missouri's chapter of Phi Beta Mu, and well, if there was something that involved bands within a 100-mile radius of St. Louis, you know Herb Duncan's hand was in it. As you listen to this conversation, you will hear a very funny story about how these two band directors met and what kept their friendship so close for probably 50, maybe 60 years now. They are two of the greatest people you'll ever meet. They are smart, they are creative, and they were not afraid to work. So hang on, because this is going to be a fun one.
Are you in the network? Do you get the advantage you deserve? For over 33 years, Kevin Lepper has provided marching shoes and accessories, concert attire and accessories, stick bags for beginners, sticks, mallets, drum heads, percussion ensembles, and so much more through his Advantage Network company. Directors in the know have been working with Kevin for years, and in addition to great products at great prices, they get the advantage of a personal commitment and communication from the man himself, Kevin Lepper. So become a part of the network, Advantage Network. Visit AdvantageNetworkInc.com to learn more. That's AdvantageNetworkInc.com. And don't forget to check out Kevin's Slapstick. It's the best one you've ever heard.
Before I get to our conversation with Jerry Hoover and Herb Duncan, I have to relay an experience I had last night. During the winter months, my wife Wanda and I escaped the cold weather, and we spent some time in California. And last night, some friends of ours took us to a little restaurant bar that was located inside what I would have to call a retirement mobile home park that was very well maintained and had a little par 3 golf course on the property. It was Wednesday night, burger night, and the night they had some entertainment, which consisted of a very good jazz guitar player, a bass player, drummer, and the most incredible conga drum player I ever heard in my life. During break, I went up and talked to the conga player, asked him for his name, and he said it was Big Black. I asked him for his first name, and again he said, Big Black. So I left it at that and asked him where he was from, and he said, no, I've been here for a lot of years now. And then I told him I'd never heard anyone play congas so beautifully as he did. And he just smiled. And then I asked who he had played with, and his response was, everybody. I played with Dizzy Gillespie, Freddie Hubbard, Randy Weston, and he went on with a whole bunch more. But the best thing about this whole experience was the people. The people who were sitting around, enjoying a beer, a glass of wine, cocktail, and enjoying the music. Good live music. Not great music, but good. Well, the conga player was great, but the music was good, and the people were so into it. These were folks who had looked like they had lived a lot of years. worked hard for a lot of years, and were at that point in time in life when they were just going to enjoy those years they still had on this earth. The band played mostly standards and some jazz tunes, and the people were singing along, humming, tapping their fingers, and just letting the music bathe them or accompany the conversation they had going on at the time. It was perfect. It was like a scene out of a movie. And for just a few minutes, I sat and I smiled and I soaked it all in. The power of music and what it means when people hear it and how it enriches their lives. Live people playing their best for live people. A sharing experience made possible by some sounds that were magically created and transported through space into the ears and eyes and hearts and minds of people who were just enjoying a Wednesday night in the sunset years of their life. What a powerful force music is. We'll be back with Herb Duncan and Jerry Hoover in just a minute.
This is Drew with thepodcastingstore.com, your one-stop shop for everything podcasting and remote learning, and a proud sponsor of Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. Listen to what we've been working on in this clip from our podcast.
We have come up with a Shure TA4-2 tip ring sleeve adapter, which allows us to use any microphone that has, in fact, been normally used on a wireless system. This is a plug used almost entirely with every Shure wireless system. So any microphone that could be used in the wireless system can be used now on an Android phone or an iPhone.
So what's the practical application that you found for these headsets?
In the pageantry activity judges sides of things. So what we'll do, in this case, this microphone fits on here like this. And in our case, because we use what's called Competition Suite most of the time, which is a software platform.
To hear the rest of this podcast, please visit thepodcastingstore.com, your one-stop shop for everything podcasting and remote learning. This is Drew with thepodcastingstore.com. Now back to Charlie.
Well, if everybody's life is as blessed as mine, they're going to be lucky people. And part of that blessing has been the wonderful people that I've gotten to know and meet and even work with a little bit over the years. And there are a couple of icons from my early days of teaching who I just look up to and respect. And our paths have crossed from time to time. I was fortunate enough to student teach with one of them. And the other guy, well, you know, he's on the Mount Rushmore of Missouri band directors, I'll tell you. So I'm joined today by Mr. Jerry Hoover and Mr. Herb Duncan. Guys, thank you so much for being on the podcast with me.
It's our pleasure. Good to be here.
And Mr. Hoover, it's great to have you back. You were with us you were in July, I think it was.
Yep.
And Herb, I'm especially honored to have you on the podcast because, you know, for those folks who may not know who you are, you were just a legend when you were at Normandy High School, and then you ran the big festivals in St. Louis. But give us a quick rundown where you grew up and what got you going in band.
Well, first of all, I, as a fifth grade student at Central Elementary School, a band came to play an assembly, and it was a WPA, Work Project Association band. And I saw something that just intrigued me, and that was the percussion section. And I got bit, and I got bit hard by that. And so I decided I'd like to do that sometime. I'd like to be in a band like that. I was in fifth grade. So I continued to pursue that interest, and it took me through my entire career. I graduated from Ferguson High School, which is no longer is in existence. Not because of me, I don't believe. But on the other hand, I then went to Central College, which is now Central Methodist University in Fayette, Missouri, and got my master's degree at the University of Kansas. And I spent 31 years of teaching in the Normandy School District.
Wow. So where did you two guys first meet?
Oh, I want Jerry to tell you
Cape
this.
Girardeau.
Yes.
Cape Girardeau, it would have been mid 60s, and it was a state convention. That's when they moved it around. So the Missouri Music Educators, and Herb had a car, a black station wagon called Black Beauty, and he had it wired with a sound system. And he was going around the campus ordering people what to do, get on the walks, clear the streets, everything else. And I thought, who is this guy? And I had a band playing, and I come ahead of the band. So Betty came, my wife came a day or so later, and with the band, and she said, who is this guy? Who is this guy driving around the campus ordering people around? And he scared her to death, I think. But that's where we first crossed paths. And I think we kind of, then after that, our bands exchanged concerts at our schools, and then he started a summer band camp, and it just grew from all that, you know.
Is he telling the truth, Herb?
And
It's 100% true. It's how we met. And I had my car with a portable PA system with a speaker under the hood. And I used it for marching band. But we would drive down the street, as Jerry said, and ask the people, but don't walk in the street, walk on the sidewalk, please.
You'd get arrested for that today. Oh man. Well, I can certainly remember meeting you, Herb, and that's when Marching Mizzou, the University of Missouri Marching Band, went to England for the bicentennial, and
No.
you and Mr. Hoover went with us all. Dr. Pickard was gracious enough he was smart enough to bring you guys with us. And I seem to remember a certain rehearsal with the band near a school by a playground where there were kids there. But I've forgotten the details. Can either one of you share that memory with me?
Well, it's an indelible memory of the trip that we've had to London. My first trip to London, I think Jerry's too, I'm not sure. But Dr. Pickard asked three of us, John Patterson from Hickman High School, Jerry Hoover, and myself, to go along to do just things that were not musical, but to help out when necessary. And he found things for us to do. I was standing off to the side while the band was rehearsing at a soccer field in England, and across the way, just over a little brook, were elementary school children. And I thought, and they were just intrigued by this large enclave of university students rehearsing. So I went to the headmaster and I said, would the children like to come over and see the band up closer? And they all lined up. And these were preschool children. These were not, maybe first or second graders for us. And I led them over to watch the band play. And that was an experience for them and an experience for us.
they were darling.
Yeah, they had big smiles on their faces when they did that. Nothing else went on during that
Was
rehearsal.
that up near Shakespeare's home?
Well,
That rehearsal that day, was that somewhere up north or near Shakespeare's home?
I don't recall exactly where it was. It was a soccer field that we were using for rehearsal. But I can certainly tell you, Charlie, what year was that? Do you recall exactly?
That was 70, 75, 76.
75.
Yeah.
Well, I certainly recall. I recall March the 14th of that year.
Yeah.
It was my birthday. And as a result,
They piled on.
Dr. Pickard from the stand said, everyone stop their playing, everybody stop. I want to just tell you that it's Mr. Duncan's birthday today. And with that, the entire brass section made its way to me very, very quickly and jumped on me in what was called the stack. they stacked themselves on me. And I went into a fetal position underneath tons and tons of university students. Well, when I got out of that, I'm sure that the young people that I brought over there from the primary school, some of them are still wondering whatever happened with these colonists and whether they were going to get out alive themselves. It was a great experience. My back still hurts from that, by the way.
You remember that, Jerry?
Oh yeah, I remember. I remember who the ringleader was, and he was a pretty good sized young man.
Who's that, Norman?
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Well, you guys were
they
both
piled on.
Oh yeah. Well, you guys were both high-powered school band directors, and of course, like all band directors, we make book on each other. You know, we want to find that there's a word on the street about the directors and their programs. So Jerry, what was the word on the street about Herb Duncan and the Normandy High School Band?
Well, that was in St. Louis. I don't know. I was that much up on it, except that we started doing exchange concerts, and I think Herb first came down to Lebanon, brought his band, and right away I was impressed with his organization. He had a crew that got off the bus and came in and sat up there, and he had a backdrop he put up immediately, even before the chairs were set. I think it was 5 flags on stands. And that was his backdrop back there. And I thought, how impressive is that? He's got it all set up, ready to go. And then I even remember kind of what he played that day. I can't remember my name from one day to the next, but I can remember things like that.
And how about you, Herb?
So then later.
I'm sorry. Keep going, Jerry.
Well, that's all right. Later, we took our band then up and played at Normandy, and that's how it kept growing, that relationship.
Right. Well, Jerry's band was certainly well known in the state. He had developed a good band in his earlier days at Lebanon High School and then moved to Jefferson City. But the thing about Jerry's band that everybody marveled at was the integrity of the band. They did everything well. And it was a band that you wanted to be part of, you wanted to emulate. And so his leadership and his creativeness made everybody very envious. You either liked him or you didn't like him, and most people liked him. Well, some people liked him, let's put it that way.
Well, as you look back, what are the characteristics you most admired about each other? Herb, I'll start with you. You mentioned that they either liked him or didn't like him. What were those characteristics that you liked about Mr. Hoover? Well,
first of all, he's 100% band, B-A-N-D. There's nothing else. When he leaves this earth, there's going to be one of the biggest bands led by Jerry Hoover wherever he lands up. But his integrity for the profession is his greatest attribute. He's got so many faults, but his integrity towards the profession is one that cannot be emulated by anybody else.
I remember student teaching with Mr. Hoover, and we were out to lunch one day, and he goes, Charlie, he said, when I retire, I'm going to buy a trailer and have a little Dixieland band and join a carnival. And he said, I'm going to play for this carnival, and I'm going to get Betty to be the ticket seller. Now, I'm not sure that ever happened, but I think he had a carnival his entire life, don't you, Herb?
Yeah, well, first of all, Jerry emulates Harold Hill in The Music Man and P.T. Barnum all put together.
I think that's good. And Jerry, I know you've always
another thing was,
go ahead, Jerry.
Our wives hit it off. Betty and Sally became dear friends, and I think they were probably contributed to that relationship through the years as much as anything too.
Yeah. Well, Jerry, I know you've always been jealous of Herb's hair. So, so besides his natural coiffure, what do you most respect about Herb?
I'm catching up with him. Well, we've just been dear friends all those years. And I think that project that Herb started when he started Lakewood Music Camp, what was that, Herb, 10 or 12 years?
Yeah, we were there 12 years.
And the endless stories that came out of those camps all those years. And yeah.
Well, Jerry, you've been involved with preparing band directors when you were at Southwest Missouri, and you've both been around band directors your whole life. What things are band directors doing better now than they did when you guys were first getting going in the profession? I'll start with you, Herb.
Yeah. Well, first of all, when I saw what you wanted to talk about in this regard is that we have much better communication. Quote, back then, we didn't talk to each other very much. We didn't have very good it wasn't bad relationships with each other. We just didn't have many relationships with each other. But today, we get together through our various organizations, but we also get together very frequently in other relationships and are able to talk and be part. If I needed something from somebody else, I'd give them a call and said, do you have the third clarinet part for whatever it was? And they said, well, I think I can find it for you. So from where I started and to where I ended, I think the biggest thing is that we're more attuned to each other's needs than we ever were before.
Jerry, how about you?
Well, back then we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have computers, we didn't have a lot of that stuff. And I don't think I could have functioned very well in this shutdown that's gone on the past year with schools and trying to stream or whatever they call it, teaching on the computers. And I don't know what would have happened to me in this day and age, but Herb was always out there on top of stuff all the time. And we just had a back and forth all the time in those years. And
you think band directors are doing things better than they did when you first started, Jerry?
I don't know. I don't think a lot of the universities are prepping directors real well. I don't think I'm not sure they really ever spend time teaching how to teach, how to organize, how to run a balanced program, how to sell your program to the community, creative thoughts. I'm not sure how much of that goes on today. And of course, back when Herb and I were going, I'm not sure it went on then. He might have had better instruction at Central's, but I always said it took me 20 years to learn enough techniques and ideas and all on how to really, really be a good teacher. And
yeah. So if you could take the majority of band directors back to school, Herb, for a semester, what would you teach them?
Well, that's the hardest question you're going to ask today. First of all, I've gone, something happened to me right now. I can't see either of you, but that's great. Am I coming through all right, Charlie?
You're coming through great, Herb. I can see you, so that's
we'll
good.
Just go on. You don't have to see me, nor do I have to see you. But to answer your question is, and as I say, it's one of the more difficult ones to answer. How to be successful. And let me just use an example. My very first year of teaching was in a very small rural community north of Kansas City. And I had a very, very small band. It wasn't very good, but it was very small too. But a new band director had come to the University of Missouri from Texas called Charles Emmons. And I took the time to write a letter to Professor Emmons, welcoming him to the state of Missouri. And I was first-year teacher. And I said, if you're ever in the Kansas City area, I'd love to have you come and work with my band. Well, I never heard anything more. But in the spring, I got a phone call, and it was from Professor Emmons. And he said, I'm going to be in Kansas City. I'd like to take you up on your offer. How do I get to your school? Well, it's a little rural school, 40 miles from downtown Kansas City. But he came and he worked with my band. And the big thing that I got out of that was what he did for me as a first-year teacher. I will never, ever forget. And I guess I would say right now, what can others take from that on how to be a good mentor, how to be a good person, and eventually a very good friend?
Was there anything in particular that he did, Herb, that you remember?
No, I don't. I know that he was very complimentary. He almost had to be, because there were so many faults with that band. There was no way that he could improve it. But he was there. He was there not for the band. He was there for me. And that was the important thing. And I think that's one of the things that I'd like to instill to anybody today, is how important you are standing up on that podium to the people that you are working with, or to other band directors.
Add to that, Jerry. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I was a fan of Charlie Emmons too. I thought he was just incredible, and I loved his personality and his detail. And he set that band program on fire at MU, and that's, I went up there to get my master's just so I could sit in classes with him, and so I think all of us were really captivated by Charlie Emmons, and he left his mark in many ways. Yeah.
Well, we're coming out of the pandemic, and like you said, Mr. Hoover, you wouldn't have wanted to teach during it. I don't think I would have. Herb, you probably didn't want to do it either. But I've spoken to a lot of veteran teachers through the podcast and some other events that I've been a part of, and one thing keeps coming up, and that is that directors are going to need to rebuild the culture of their programs. So how does a director build a culture? I mean, you both had incredible programs. They had it was a culture, it was a family kind of a thing. Your bands were more than classes. I mean, they were just a tight-knit group of students who were all headed in the same direction. So Herb, how does one build a culture?
Through relationships. Band, you said it, Charles, you said it. Band's more than just the music and the notes. And you build a culture through relationships and shared experiences. And the people that you work with will take those experiences throughout their life. They'll have other experiences too. But each of us, I have many former students who said, "Oh, do you remember?" And I'll say, "Oh, I sure do," which I oftentimes did not. But it was something that was very important to them. But it always had to do with what we did as a group of people. So I would think the important thing that I would say to your question is, you build a culture through positive relationships.
How about you, Jerry?
Well, I knew you were going to ask this, and I'm a little hesitant to say too much because I just marvel at the directors that have survived this situation and the streaming and all. I think I would set immediate goals. I'd probably pour on extra rehearsals. I would create a goal to go after the kids and try to get that culture Herb's talking about, get it going again, and I'd probably reach out in ways with the student body with the band program, whether it be showing up at the lunchroom during the noon meals and things like that with the band. I'd pour it on, because these kids have missed so much during this that it's just and they so want it. I think the kids really want it. I think they've just been so frustrated, and I'd reach out to the community. I was always one that felt like you reach out to the community, whether it was with performances or attending or providing entertainment or speaking at civic clubs at their luncheons and all like that. I think I'd come at them with everything I had, trying to revive the program.
Yeah, your programs were always so visible, Jerry. Herb, would you do the same kind of thing with the performances and reaching out to the community and within the school?
Oh, very definitely. Very definitely. I think Jerry's program and mine emulate each other in our parallel programs. We do it a little differently, maybe, but we're on the same track.
I remember student teaching with you, Mr. Hoover, and you would take me up to meetings that you had with your principal, Mr. Fleming, and you didn't always get what you wanted in those meetings. And when we would walk back to your office, I remember one day you said, "Well, Charlie, that didn't go very well, but let me think about this, and I'll go back next week, and I'll get what I want eventually." So if you were going to speak to Mr. Fleming today, or your administrator today, after coming out of the pandemic, what kind of things would you want them to know, and what kind of things would you be telling them?
Oh, mercy. He'd probably lock the door and keep me out. I'd probably be up there that much trying to. I don't know. You have to throw yourself into it, like Herb's saying, and unite those kids, and we're going to make up for lost time. We're going to rebuild this. We're going to reach out here, and so but I'm hesitant to say that, directors, because I can't imagine how they've survived this past year and the strain they've been under. It's just unreal.
Herb,
but band's a place to do it. By God.
Yeah. Herb, what would you be talking to your administrator about?
Well, I think the very best thing I ever did in this regard was I was invited to a principal's monthly meeting to explain what I was trying to do. And the principals were all elementary, middle school, and the one high school principal. And I said to them, what I'm trying to do is to build a basic foundation for a good program for all students. And I said, I'm going to start at the elementary level and work from there. Well, of course, all of a sudden, my elementary principals were just bowled over by the fact that I wanted to work with their students more than I did with the high school band. I didn't put it in those terms, but what I meant to say was I can't build a good high school group unless I have the support from the very beginning.
So if you were a new teacher, would you do anything differently, Jerry?
Knowing what I know now?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, yes. Yeah, I think those early years, you're just feeling your way and bumping into walls as you go, and this worked, that didn't work, and yeah.
How many years did it take for you to feel like you're really starting to get a handle on it, Jerry?
20.
Wow. How about you, Herb? Did you do anything differently?
Very definitely. I'd work with my third clarinet players.
But you're a drummer.
That's why I work with the third clarinet players. No, I say that not in jest. I didn't take enough time as an early teacher to work with those who needed me most. I would always work with with the lead trumpet player, the first clarinet player. That was easy. But it was the third clarinet or the fourth French horn player that I didn't show much either appreciation for or interest in. And if I started again today, I'd go to the very back of the section and work forward.
You know, that's a great point. I was doing a clinic for a visiting band at Vandercook, and we kind of were working on a piece, and the French horns were just a mess. And I got back to the horns, and I asked the first horn player to play, and I asked the second horn player to play, and asked the third horn. I think there were only 3 players there. And I asked the third horn player to play, and it was just horrible. And he kind of looked up to me and he goes, "I really suck, don't I?" And I said, "No." So went back and kind of tinkered a little bit with it. So I said, "No." I said, "Take your mouthpiece out," and I said, and let the second horn player give you his horn or whatever. So he played on the other horn. Well, he sounded great. And come to find out, one of the rotors had been turned around in the horn, and it didn't play all. But this kid had been doing this for probably a couple of years, and he just thought he was a terrible player. So, yeah, working with those lower kids, I think, is really, really important. And not lower kids, but the kids in those lower seats in the section. I think that's really important. Yeah. Well, Jerry, I asked you this when you were on in July, and we never really fully answered this question, and you kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier today. You know, so now that I got you both here, I want to ask it again. So what are colleges and universities missing the boat on when it comes to preparing music teachers? Jerry, let's start with you on that one.
Well, teaching techniques, creativity in run a program, organizational skills, a lot of the nuts and bolts that go with it. I think I'm probably going to get in trouble here. I think a lot of your applied faculty, you know, they're not quite often not good fans of parts of the band program, and they're I don't know, sometimes they're a detriment, sometimes they're an asset if they're well balanced into the program. So I don't know. I think you got to teach them organizational techniques. You got to teach them sales techniques for selling the program. You got to teach them tricks to the trade in raising funds. You got to teach them tricks in the creating a good solid foundation starting from day one with your beginning band. It's more than just teaching them the embouchure and the notes. There's so much more that goes with it, right down to how to practice and how to draw the parents in quickly to this new experience going on in the family. And so, yeah, I'd be much better at in those early years. I finally figured it all out as I was going through it, but I'll tell you, learn from other directors. I mean, I learned from Herb. I learned from any good band director that was going at the time. I would attach myself to them and pick their brains, you know, how many ideas I could get from them and thoughts. And, yeah.
Herb, what about you?
Well, Jerry had all the experience to answer that question because I only taught for three years at the university level, and I did not had that kind of experience that Jerry had. All mine was at the secondary level. But he used the word organization. And I think the key to almost any success along these lines is being organized. I think that organization is the key to success with many, many things. My best teacher was not my band's director. My best teacher was my high school biology teacher. He was the most organized man I have ever seen. And we walked into that class and we knew exactly what he was going to talk about. And we knew exactly what he was going to test us all on Friday. And I learned more about organization in biology than any place else in the world. And I've used those skills, I think, one way or the other all my life.
Well, you guys were both, and you still are, master communicators. I mean, I sent an email to you about 4 or 5 times in the last week, Herb, and I got an answer back within 15 minutes every time. And Mr. Hoover, you lost a few years of your life when they stopped making those Scripto pencils that used to put that big long lead in and you screw it on. And you, because you had one, and when I remember being your student teacher, you would write at least one note every day. And then when you would go home at night, you'd be there with Betty, you'd be watching TV, and you had a clipboard in your hand, and you were still writing notes to people. So where did you guys learn this importance of communication and being responsible when people reach out?
I don't know about her. When we started out, I don't know that it ever occurred to me how important the relationships were going to be with my students. I don't know what I thought about it. But I gradually found out that, and I used to pound this with my college kids, that when you got to teach, your students are going to remember you. Now, how they remember you is going to be up to you, but you can't keep them from remembering you. They'll show back up. When I turned 80, I got birthday cards from my first teaching position, which meant those kids were in their 70s. And so once you realize that the depth of that relationship with the students and all, I think it takes on a whole new dimension in your teaching, because I can't imagine these teachers today that are not wanting to go back to their classes that we're hearing about all over the country, because I would just have been in misery being separated from those kids and those personalities and those various experiences I had with them, and it was so important to me. And I think that I don't know if that's ever. Did you ever hear that discussed, Herb, when you were going through? No.
Well, it's not something that you discussed, Jerry, but I'm going to tell you the story, or Charlie, the story that sort of goes back to when I took my band down to Jerry's Lebanon High School. And I played Cuba High School in the morning and Jerry's in the afternoon. And Jerry had set me up for an evening concert at Fort Leonard Wood. And I was so excited. I took my band over to Fort Leonard Wood, and they fed us at the NCO mess, and the kids were just so excited. And we went into this almost double gymnasium, and there were about 400 chairs all lined up. And it was going to be a culmination of what I call band tour. And it was going to be a culmination. And we got over, and I brought the band back. We assembled in a dressing room, or a locker room. And I went out to talk to the NCO, and he said, well, we'll be ready in a few moments. And I said, fine. And I went back in, and I said to my kids, we've had a long, hard week of practice and 2 great concerts today, but this has got to be your best. And I said, never give up. And I don't know why I said that, but it was going to be one of my speeches that they knew they were going to get, but I just said, never give up. We went out and we played the concert, and they played the best concert that they've ever played. And we walked off the stage, and some of the kids were crying, and they were crying. They said, Mr. Duncan, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And I said, don't be sorry. You did the very best job you could. There were 12 people in the audience. Mm. That story has a sequel, Charlie.
Okay.
Many, many years later, I'm getting ready to go to church on Christmas Eve, and I get a phone call, and a young man said, Mr. Duncan. I said, yeah, this is Gary Bostruck. I said, Gary. He said, do you remember me? Oh, I said, I sure do. Drummer, Normandy High School. He said, yeah. He said, do you remember the biggest lesson you ever taught to us? And I said, well, I don't know. He said, it was never give up. He said, I own a plastics factory here in Denver now. And he said, I've had my ups and downs. I've lost a lot of money and I've made a lot of money, but I never gave up. And you know where I got that from?
That's a pretty great story. That's a pretty great. So I'm going to go back to we kind of got off base a little bit on this, but it's a great stuff. But how did you guys learn the importance of communication? You know, where did you develop those skills, or who taught you that? Was that just something that became innate in your personality?
No one taught me. You can't answer that question, Charles. It's who you are and how you want to relate to the next person. You know,
Yeah.
If somebody writes me, apparently I'm important enough to them, so I ought to be important enough to write back to them, one way or the other. Jerry's a great communicator.
Yeah, absolutely. He always sends packets of stuff. He sends me like packets of things. It's like
Oh, me too.
400
Sure.
sheets of flyers from previous concerts, and I mean, man, he is like the world's greatest. I love it.
Well, Charlie, he and I only live 2 miles apart. He sends me stuff too.
Oh man, you guys have both worked on so many projects. What's the most fun you ever had working together?
No question. That's an easy one to answer. And I think Jerry might even concur with it. We had 12 great summers at Lakewood Music Camp that bonded us with kids and with our families and everything else. We've done a lot of projects together, that's for sure. We're involved in one right now. But the Lakewood Music Camp, we ate together, slept together, played volleyball together and everything else. And there are stories out there that are that can't be retold correctly.
Herb built we did everything at that camp, concerts and concert band and jazz and marching, everything at that camp. And he built a tower for the marching field in there. And then he found a bathroom stool lid, and he painted the title on and mounted that to the side of that tower. And it disappeared toward the end of the years of that camp. And you know where it is now? It's in one of our bathrooms here at the house. One of those kids at that camp took that stool lid and cleaned it up and framed it. It's in a glass framed case, and it's got this dedication of this student to that Lakewood camp and what it meant to him and to all the staff and all. Strange things come back in different ways and you don't realize. I don't think we realize sometimes how deep things we say or do or experiences we have with the students that stay with them the rest of their life,
I totally agree. I mean, you just caused me to have a major flashback from my early teaching days. I had when I graduated from Missouri, I ended up buying a brand new car, and I had a 1976 Chevrolet Monte Carlo, and it had wire wheel covers on it. And I got to Kansas City and took the job at Winnetonka and woke up one morning and the wheel covers were gone. And man, I was so depressed, man. It was just it was brutal. It was just brutal. So I don't know. They cost probably like $200-300 back then. Put a new set of wheel covers on, drove it about another couple of months, wake up one morning and the wheel covers are gone again. Oh man. So I was going to drive it without wheel covers because I wasn't going to sure spend that kind of money anymore. And I probably went 3 months, and I will go to my car one morning and the wheel covers are back on it. And I couldn't figure out what the heck ever happened. So we had a reunion of the Winnetonka band probably, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years ago. And I'm standing around with a couple of kids, and one of the trumpet players, I won't mention his name, he said, He said, you never mentioned that morning that you discovered that all your wheel covers were back on your car. And I said, no. He said, you have any idea where those wheel covers came from? And I said, well, I think I do now. And he said, you know how much trouble we had going out and finding a car that had those wheel covers? We could take them off and put them on your car. So anyhow, those kids do amazing things, don't they?
Yep, they do.
Okay, one last question, because I know you guys got a busy day here. You got important corporate meetings and luncheons and all that sort of stuff. So as you look back, Jerry, what's the one thing you learned from Herb Duncan that made you a better band director?
I don't know. I think our friendship was a good part of it because we were in lockstep with one another about things. And that camp that Herb started was a binder for 10, 12 years. It was just, and we had busloads of kids. My kids looked forward to that camp in the summer more than anything, and we had every kind of experience in that camp you could imagine, from the intramurals and the cabin inspections and the rehearsals and the come and go staff besides us, that were part of it. And so I think, and we've just been close family friends all these years, and it didn't hurt that our wives hit off with one another as well. I think Betty would tell you Sally was her best friend, And then, of course, Sally had ballet, I'll never forget the night we were in Warrensburg at a camp, and we were walking back from something, and she was feeling rather frivolous, and she started talking about how high she could kick and all, and she started demonstrating it, and she could kick over Herb's head. And we're going down the street, and she's doing pirouettes and all, and then kicking over Herb's head. And I thought, that is an interesting relationship there,
Wow. Herb, what did you learn from Jerry that made you a better band director?
One word: his dedication. His dedication to his work, without any question. Even today, he's dedicated to what he believes in and what he thinks is right for himself, for students, and for the world. He's out to Charlie. He's out to change the world. I mean, he hasn't let up. His dedication to being the knight in white armor, riding the white horse up and down the, to make things right. And I would say the biggest thing I get from him is that his dedication to what he believes is his greatest attribute. He's got so many things that are bad and wrong with him, but this is one of the best things he's got going for him.
Any final thoughts from you, Jerry?
Well, I don't know. I think we fed back and forth. I just always loved Herb and everything about him, and and what an exciting thing it was when we go up and play at Normandy with the band. Back then you took your band and you played for other school assemblies, and they turned the whole student body out for it, and
right.
Those were neat experiences. And
yeah, Herb, any final thoughts from you?
Nope, except that you have two of the people right now that you said ought to be on playing cards or exchange cards. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Mount Rushmore.
Oh, those are legends. I don't think we're legends yet.
I think you're legends. Absolutely. In your own mind, you're a legend. That's for damn sure.
In our own mind, yeah.
But you are a legend amongst the band directors. Trust me.
But we started off telling people to get off the sidewalk, as our first experience. But we're still working together, Charlie. We got a band we're putting together. So
talk about the band you're putting together.
Well, the band we're putting together is called the University Herald brass, which is for university students to perform on the 4th of July in the city of St. Louis for a nationally televised 4th of July celebration on CBS television. And so we've had it for 3 years in a row. We didn't have it last year because of the pandemic, but that's our project that we're working on right now.
That's great. That's great. Well, Herb Duncan and Jerry Hoover, you guys are the best, and I love you both. And I wish I could go and have a cup of coffee with you. And I know there'd be a bunch of laughs involved. And so hopefully I'll get to see you soon.
Well, Charlie, have you paid your Phi Beta Mu dues yet?
Well, before we go, you have to tell this story about when I left Missouri and I started teaching in Kansas, and you were the executive secretary of the Phi Beta Mu chapter in Missouri.
Right.
And I said, would you send my dues or my membership over to Kansas? So tell them what you did.
Yeah, well, you asked me to do that, and Phi Beta Mu is a national organization for band directors, and each state has its own chapter, and I was the secretary treasurer of the Missouri chapter. So you asked me to send information to Kansas about you, and I did. And I sent it to someplace, so I think Colby, Kansas, or someplace like that, to their secretary. And I said, we were more than happy to get rid of, I didn't put it in those terms, of Charlie Mangini from Missouri.
Yeah, you did.
Kansas. And, but I said, if you'll send me the $75 transfer fee, I'll be more than happy to send you all the information. Never heard from the guy at all.
Herb Duncan and Jerry Hoover, God bless you both. Thanks a million, guys.
Charlie, thank you. We miss you.
Good to see you, Charlie.
Jerry Hoover and Herb Duncan. If life was a poker game, that would be a pair that would beat a full house every time. Just imagine being at a convention and hearing and seeing a guy drive his station wagon down the street with a bullhorn coming out the front grill telling people to get off the sidewalks. That's unbelievable. You know, our profession is comprised of some of the greatest people in the world. People who love people and who love music and learned long ago that if we could connect people to music, we could also connect people to each other. Jerry Hoover and Herb Duncan have made that connection thousands and thousands of times in their lives, and are two of the many reasons I am so proud I chose to be a band director in my life. Their passion, their humility, their respect, and their humanity, they also serve as great accompaniments to their talents as musicians and teachers. I owe them a lot, and I don't think I'm the only one who feels that way. So thanks, Mr. Hoover, and thanks, Mr. Duncan. You are two very special people in my life. Well, that's Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. I'll be back with another great conversation. But for now, thank you so much for listening. And please tell your friends and colleagues about Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. Available on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your favorite podcast. This is Charlie Mangini wishing you the best. And as always, thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. If you would like to send a question to Charlie or have a comment, please send an email to bandtalkcharlie@gmail.com. We hope you will let your colleagues, students, and friends know about Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to being with you again soon.